Hi, I'm Aubrey.
Hi, I'm Kathleen. We're two friends having a good time.
I happen to be a Christian, and that's okay.
And I happen to be an atheist, and that's okay.
Welcome to the Christian and the Atheist podcast.
Let's dive in.
This episode has a trigger warning for sexual assault.
One of the other big things that led me out of the church happened during that time. There was a woman who showed up with two little girls.
This story's sad, y'all.
It's sad. It's a rough one. You may understand why I was like, what am I a part of right now?
Mm-hmm.
And they just had the clothes on their back and a van that was about to be repossessed. And she essentially had found out that her husband was sexually assaulting her daughters. And she got up in the middle of the night, put her kids in the car, and ran. And she got as far as she got, which was our town. And she went to the local Mormon Church and said, which she was a member of back in her old hometown, and said, I need help. I don't have any clothes. I don't have any food. I don't have a home. I got these two little girls that have been through this crazy thing, and I'm trying to press charges against this man, which means that through the state, I have to take them to counseling and court visits and hospital visits and CPS issues. And I need a car because this is his car and it's about to be reported stolen. They're about to take it. And I need help. And the Mormon Church looked at her and said, you haven't been paying tithing, so we can't help you. Which was infuriating. Because what are we doing if we're not helping people like this?
Yeah.
She did everything she was supposed to do. She figured out this thing was happening, so she got out of that situation. And she put her kids first. That's a good mom. She's doing her best.
Oh, yeah.
And, wasn't it?
And like your first reaction, I'm going to go receive help from my church.
From my church.
And she knew these people, right?
She was a Mormon in her local congregation that she was from.
And went to y'all.
And she ran in the middle of the night.
And
got the girls had footy pajamas, and that's the only clothing they had. She had on a pair of jeans. That's it.
Yeah.
And so we, as Relief Society, banded together and asked for donations of clothing, car seats, and the church helped her find a halfway house in town that was for convicts getting out of prison. And that's where she lived. And it was like pulling teeth trying to get people to sign up to give her rides to take her children to their mandated court visits so that she could press charges on her pedophile husband. And I think I personally, and this is not as a way to brag, but as a way to illustrate how little the church was willing. The church is an institution, not the local people, not the local bishop. His hands were tied. He can't do anything that Salt Lake doesn't let him do. And so the church as an institution is the issue here, not local bishop so-and-so. I think I gave more monetarily and donating of my own kids' toys and dishes and stuff than the church did. My own self, who was broke college students with toddlers.
And you were tithing.
And my own tithing, which Brandon and I looked up.
Oh, no, I'm scared. Tell me.
When we left, we had paid about $10,000 to the church. Do you want to know how much income we had made during those however many years?
Yeah.
My income as a part-time hairstylist, and Brandon's income as the guy who sprays pest control on part-time. We did not make $10,000 worth of tithing. We gave $10,000 to this church, and we desperately could have used that money. But anyway, that issue with that woman, that whole experience to me was I saw the inner workings of the church that claims to be God's place on earth. Jesus himself was a member of this church in Jerusalem, they believe. And yet when a woman...
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
When a woman shows up... Yeah, they do. When a woman shows up with little babies who have been abused and she needs shelter, what are we not doing if it's not helping the homeless women, the widow's mite, the suffer the little children? Like, how many of these Jesus parables did he teach that we just said, but you haven't given us any money, so nope. And so that was so hard for me
Yeah.
to rationalize how this is happening. And it was hard for me to look into the belly of the beast, essentially, and say, this is not moral. This is not right. We're not treating people right. Especially since the money that is supposed to be going towards people who are in that situation is supposed to be the tithing money that I myself gave. So if I'm paying my tithing, and if that guy's paying his tithing, if that guy's paying his tithing, which Brandon knew because he was the guy who counted the tithing money every week, he knew how much money that we made as a ward and tithing every week. He's looking at it going, we had enough money that we could have rented her an apartment for 6 months and helped her lease a car to get her on her feet. But Salt Lake said no because she hadn't been paying tithing. So that was really hard. That was a rough one. Go ahead.
I have to figure out how to word this because it's like of course you're going to compare your church.
Sure.
I'm going to compare my church to your church.
Sure.
There's no way that would be okay with our church.
It should have been okay in any church.
I could walk in and say, well, they have denied people. I know they have. But they have a certain amount of money that they are allowed to give people that walk in and say, I need help.
Yeah.
They clearly make the judgment. Do you need help? Yes. This is why. And then they give you money. And it's like, there's so many different, I would almost like the wards that she talks about. There's so many different campuses, but there's a pastor over these campuses that have as much, like sometimes they do have to go to Central is what they call it to clarify things. But I mean, there's so much that our church does that's not just like Central doesn't tell them where to put the money for the local church. They have a pastor who's in the local church. They're literally called the local missions pastor who takes care of all that.
See, the way the Mormons do it is the tithing gets paid. They put it in a bank account that is direct to Salt Lake. And then Salt Lake gives a budget to each ward around the world, a certain amount each month. Yeah. And they are allowed to do with that with approval. And that's it. And so, my local ward, maybe I live in an affluent area and we're making lots and lots of money and we are paying lots and lots of tithing. We still only get X amount for our budget. Whereas, and so it's not localized based on what the needs are in the local area. It's just.
See, I don't know a whole lot about my church's way of taking care of the money, but I do know the way that, I have seen, it doesn't seem like so. What the heck?
Well, especially, it's also frustrating when you learn that the Mormon Church has over $100,000 in stocks and bonds just in the stock market.
Cool.
Or is it 100 million? I don't remember. It's a lot. It's a lot just hanging out in the stock market for fun. And they built a shopping mall in Salt Lake that's several $billion project.
And they don't pay taxes.
I don't know.
I don't know. That blows my mind.
The heads of the church get, I think it's around $100,000 a year in a stipend, plus a penthouse, plus cars paid for, plus all that.
Well, maybe we should start a cult.
Yeah, but Susan and her 2 babies can't get an apartment because she hasn't been paying $38 a month in tithing. Anyway, so that was difficult for me. So
I couldn't. I think that would have broke my heart.
It was. Really
I would have
bad.
looked at that
it was really hard. That was
being a woman with children yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Oof. And it was heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak when it was dealing with this woman. She was very strong and she was very smart and she was just she was trying to figure her life out for her babies and she just couldn't get any help from the one place that should have been helping her. So at this point, Brandon and I, the way ex-Mormons call it is, the way the analogy they give with a lot of people who end up leaving the church is, imagine you have a bookshelf and it's, loaded up full of heavy, heavy books. and you keep stacking stuff on this shelf, eventually the shelf is going to break.
Yeah.
So each one of these heavy books is the way my assault was handled and this woman's experience with trying to receive assistance. And, you know, and so as things would happen in our lives, or as things that we would learn about the church, like, for example, learning about how the leaders are paid X amount, but we can't get money to help people locally, like, that's another book on the shelf. Yep. And eventually your shelf breaks. And so for me, the moment during this time, leading up to the moment my shelf broke, quote unquote, we had moved to Arizona and I was pregnant with our third baby, and Brandon was doing a master's program in 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
Or 9 months, rather. He fit an entire master's program into 9 months. And
it'd take me like 12 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Just because I got to take a break.
Yeah. A master's of biomedical sciences in 9 months' time is nutso. So he was doing that. And I had 2 little babies, and we were across the country from everybody we knew. And Brandon was starting to research some of the history of the church that I won't get into a whole lot here because it was never really my thing, like my hang up. But a lot of the history that we were taught growing up as Mormons at the time where we were growing up is different than the history as fact. So just to give an example, the guy who founded the Mormon Church, his name was Joseph Smith. And growing up, I was taught that he did not have multiple wives. He had one wife. Her name was Emma. They were soulmates. They loved each other forever and ever and ever. And that was the story.
How pretty.
In real life, he had lots of multiple wives, including some as young as 14. Women who were mother-daughter teams, sister teams. At one point, he would send women's husbands on missions and then tell them that God told them that they had to marry him, or their husbands would die out on their missions, or their families would move to apostasy, or they would be thrust into the gates of hell, or whatever. And in the end, was kind of a skis ball. So,
yeah, and he is the main guy.
Yeah. And so Brandon was researching all this and kind of telling me things like, did you know this? And I'd be like, no, I've never heard that. That's crazy. And we'd research it, and he'd research it primarily. I'd be like, oh, that's nuts. And that's, again, books added to the shelf. And in 2015, we moved back here, and our littlest daughter was born, and the Mormon Church came out with a policy. And this was the moment that Brandon and I were like, oh, we're done. We were already sort of like, a lot of this doesn't feel right. A lot of the things that we were taught growing up doesn't feel right. And we essentially, while we lived in Arizona, we looked around our lives and realized we were killing ourselves for this religion, and we weren't happy. It wasn't helping our lives. It wasn't making us happy.
Yeah.
Which I feel like it should, and it wasn't. So we were already sort of like stepping back. And then in 2015, the church came out with a policy that was that children of gay parents are not allowed to have any of the ordinances. They're not allowed to get baptized. They're not allowed to take the sacrament. They're not allowed to, basically these things that Mormons believe are soul saving. They're not allowed to do because their parents happen to be gay, unless they disavow their parents. That's horrific. That's horrific. You're telling me that 2 gay guys who adopted a beautiful little girl and she wants to be Mormon,
or got a surrogate,
or maybe had children from previous relationships, or however it may be, if their children want to get baptized in the Mormon Church, they're not allowed unless they publicly disavow their parents.
Wow.
Talk about a family religion. No. And so we were like,
only on their terms.
I couldn't stand for it. Growing up, I had multiple friends that were part of the LGBTQ community, especially once I became a hairstylist and started working in salons. I made a ton of people. I knew tons of people, made a lot of friends. I have family members who are gay. And I looked at this policy that's supposed to be for a church that's supposed to be a family church. We're supposed to be saving as many souls as we can. Doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Jesus wants you, right? Unless your parents are gay. Like, ew. Ew. And so that was the moment Brandon and I were like, oh no, we can't be a part of this organization anymore. And so I think we went to church. The last time we went to church was one of the ordinances they're talking about is called a baby blessing. Mm-hmm. When babies are born, they get like a special prayer given over them by their male priesthood family members.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a blessing, you know? It's like
we dedicated our kids.
Yeah.
It's not baptism.
No, but it's the same type of thing. Yeah. And so we stayed long enough for Elena to be blessed, and then that was the last time we went to church was her baby blessing.
Okay, so that's the camel that, or the straw, the book that broke the shelf.
The book, that's when our shelves broke essentially. And so we kind of stepped back, and our original plan was to sort of just kind of fade out, stop going to church. If people ask about it, we kind of hedge the question, not outright saying it, because again, our entire family members, Brandon's parents, grandparents, my parents, sisters, grandparents, everybody is still very active, very believing Mormons.
Had anyone else left the church?
Around the same time that we were sort of talking about like, oh, we don't know if this is right, Brandon's siblings, his sister and brother, were doing the same thing. And at first we didn't realize it. We were all kind of doing our own thing at the same time without knowing.
Not
and then,
wild.
I know. And then they kind of started talking to each other, and someone would say something and someone would be like, yeah, I kind of heard about that. Did you hear about this? And after a while they kind of outright said like, okay, now wait a minute. How do you, are we both? Yeah, we're both doing this. Okay. And so, yeah, our original plan was just to sort of fade out.
Yeah.
We told the church we don't want any callings right now. I had just had a baby. Brandon was just starting. Smart. Brandon was just starting like a very strenuous school, like huge amounts of craziness. And so we were both like, we're not going to have any callings right now. We're just going to sort of fade into the background. But the church doesn't like that. So we started getting a lot of surprise visits and mail being sent to not only us, but to our children. So I'd get letters in the mail to Portia, who at the time was 6 or 7. 7. She was almost 7. And so we were getting, mail addressed to her.
Yeah.
And we'd open it and it'd be stuff telling her that she needed to come back to church. And we were getting the missionaries were coming to our house multiple times. I had a woman who started kind of harassing me over the text. Mormons do something, it used to be called home teaching and visiting teaching. I forget what it's called now. They changed the name of it after I left the church. But essentially it's where you're assigned a friend in the church.
Yeah, I've heard this.
And they can, that way they meet with you once a month, you chat,
It's basically what I am for my leaders.
Yeah. It's like
checking in on them and making sure that they're not lost in the shuffle of things.
Yeah, it honestly is a great idea. Like, because people sometimes fall through the cracks of life,
Yeah, mine, I won't harass anybody though.
Yeah.
I just have to make sure I check in on them at least once a month if we're not in church for the summer and for the youth group. So, yeah. I had a woman who was assigned as my visiting teacher, and she contacted me and said, hey, this is Sister so-and-so. I'd love to come by. And I said, basically, hi, No.
Well, I said it very nicely. I thought, I know that each one of these visiting teachers has at least 2, sometimes more people they're trying to visit. And so I said, I have family in the area. I have friends in the area. At this point in time, I don't need a visiting teacher.
Right.
Please, visit somebody who does need it.
That's sweet. What a nice way to do that.
And
You're cute.
She basically texted back, and this is somebody who I'd never met.
Oh.
I'd never spoken to her face to face. She basically texted back and said, as somebody who is inactive, which is what somebody like me at the time was called, as someone who's inactive, you don't have a support system. And without the church, all your friends and family will be gone. And started being kind of rude about it. And so...
Wow, that's really passionate.
Yeah. And so we had
like in the way you don't want them to be.
So we had contacted the church and said, at this time, please, you don't need to visit us. You don't need to stop by. Please tell the missionaries we're not interested.
Right.
You know, it's called do not contact. We said, please put us on the do not contact list.
Yeah.
We don't need it. We don't want it. You can use your time wisely in a different direction.
I feel like that's nice.
And they didn't do that. And they kept coming and kept showing up. At one point, I was home with a nursing baby and 2 6- and 4-year-old daughters, home alone all day.
Yeah.
And the missionaries started peeking into my windows to try and see if we were home.
That's nuts. That's so inappropriate.
Yeah. And we knew Portia was about to turn 8. She was 7 years old at the time. This went on for about a year.
Wow.
Yes.
Dedicated.
Yeah. And we knew...
Oh my gosh, that's sad.
We knew it was only
trauma.
going to amp up as she got closer to 8 years old.
Wow. Oh my...
Because 8 is when kids are baptized. And if kids aren't... I've been in these meetings. I remember these meetings where we have a list of all the 8-year-old kids who are not baptized. And we say we need to get a hold of their families and we need to get these kids baptized. And we knew we were about to hit that list, especially... Since we are from the area, we have a recognizable name. Our parents, our family members all live in the area. And so we basically made the decision to resign from the church, which is having to pull your name off the records.
Okay. Well, that answers a question I had.
Yeah. Which was a whole nother experience.
So that's why it took you 2 years to get your names off the record.
Yeah. Because we were trying to beat off missionaries with a stick from my... climbing into my chimney like Santa.
Wow.
So
you got your names off the list.
In order to do that,
tell us about that.
The traditional way is by sitting down with the bishop and saying, we want to resign our name off the list. They are...
Tell me how that goes. I bet it's really pleasant.
No. So they are advised that what they need to do is try to convince you not to. And so they try to, usually the way it goes is they will have you, let's try for 6 months for you to go to church every Sunday and then see how you feel. Let's try for 6 months for you to pray. When was the last time you went to the temple? When was this or that? You know, we didn't want to mess with that. We already knew what we wanted. Yeah. We had talked about it together as a couple extensively. Like, I didn't even get into the amount of late night discussions where we sat there, Brandon and I, talking about what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our families? What does this mean for our kids? How do we move forward? How do we not move forward? Are we willing to try and change it from the inside? Are we not? Like, years of stress about this. Yeah. So, we decided there's a nonprofit run out of Salt Lake by a guy. This shows you how much of an issue this is within the church. It's called quitmormon.com.
I'm going to put that in the description.
It's free. It's donation based. So you can donate $5 or you can donate $500. And he is an attorney who has a letter. It's like a form letter, but you fill in your information. And it's an official attorney letter sent to the church that says... You will remove the records. You will do it discreetly. You will do it privately. You'll do it this time, and we don't agree to X, Y, and Z. So we specifically asked in our letter that because we have a lot of family in the area, in the exact same, you know, who likely in Mormonism terms, this is essentially branding yourself a Satanist. This is like,
wow, this
is big deal bad. Basically, 2 active members of the church resigning and pulling your name off the records of the church is essentially like we dissolved our temple marriage. We dissolved our sealings to our family members. So in the next life, the way Mormons believe, in the next life when we all die, I'm not part of the family because I dissolved that by resigning from the church. Brandon and I aren't still married in the next life because we dissolved our temple marriage by resigning from the church. So it's a big deal. And so we knew this is something that is going to be very hurtful to our families and very hard for them to understand and hard for them to come to terms with.
Yep.
And so we specifically asked in the letter that's sent to it's called the stake president. It's essentially like the bishop's bishop, basically. He's a head over all of the local bishops and wards. And that's who does all this. We basically said, please allow us our privacy in telling our family members this decision.
So you hadn't told them yet?
Not yet. They knew we were.
So that was in your contract.
And that evening that the stake president got our letter, he called my in-laws.
Oh my gosh.
And told them what he had just gotten. And he pulled my sister, who was teaching Sunday school to children at the time. He pulled her out of a Sunday afternoon in the middle of it and told her. And so she broke down, because this is devastating news, and had to go back in and finish teaching her Sunday school lesson to children while sobbing. Completely disregarded all of our wishes.
So was it in a lawyer's contract?
Yes, in an attorney's
Isn't that illegal?
letter. Technically, coming from attorney, he didn't sign any contract, and neither did we, so no. But he got a letter from an attorney saying this is what needs to happen, and he completely disregarded it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, what a
And so
winner.
that basically made the decision for me that I made the right decision.
Yeah,
in
totally.
doing this. Even though I already felt like I did, but that was just the icing on top.
Oh, yeah.
That said, like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of this anymore if they're willing to treat people this way. And not me. He treated my family poorly.
Yeah.
Instead of giving them the time to talk to me about it and me explain to them how I feel and them explain to me how they feel, my family had to find out from some stranger who just said, hey, here's some devastating news. Bye. Like, that's awful. And he did apologize after I called. And the excuse that he gave, which I don't want to put him under the bus. I think, again, he's not trained. He has no idea what he's doing. He's a guy who works at like a flooring business who's just been thrown into this and is still trying to work full time.
Well, you're being nice.
You know, he's not an evil person.
Yeah.
He said, you know, I've never received a resignation in this form, so I didn't really know what to do. And I said, right, but it said what you're supposed to do. And he said, I didn't want your family to find out from some random member. And I said, right, but you're the random member. He couldn't resist being the one to break the news.
And that was what.
And it caused a lot of problems.
That's your family.
Obviously, the news either way was going to cause problems.
Yeah, of course. But that's for you guys to.
Yeah. No matter what, my family and Brandon's family were going to take it in a way that was hurtful, because to them it is very hurtful. Right. And I understand that. And I still feel awful about that. None of this that we never made decisions with the hope that anyone would get their feelings hurt. We knew they would have their feelings hurt, because how can they not?
You didn't go into it being like, I'm ready to piss everyone off. No,
it was family. That's why it took us so long.
Yeah.
That's why we sat there letting the missionaries peek into our windows for a year. Oh, we just kind of were like, oh no. And it did. There was a lot of tension with both of our families for a while. And it's still, you know.
I want to say.
Yes.
We are being very careful with how Kathleen's talking about this.
I am really trying to.
Because nobody wants to hurt anybody.
No.
Especially Kathleen.
No. For my family members and friends who are still members of the church listening to this, my stance then is the same as my stance now, that if this is working for you and this is making you happy, that's great. Do it. Great. I'm thrilled. Yeah. I hope that it is. I hope it's working for you. I hope it makes you happy. But it wasn't working for me, and it didn't make me happy.
With that being said, there was trying times for their families.
Yeah, there was a lot of tension on both sides.
Yeah, we're not trying to stir that up, but we do want it to be known. It wasn't easy. We don't need to tell stories.
Yeah.
That happens when you leave the church, I guess.
It does. And honestly, we got very lucky that I know a lot of people who've left the Mormon Church and their families didn't speak to them again. And I know a lot of people, Brandon and I got very lucky that we came to the same conclusions at the same time.
I know that's another thing I want to say. Yeah. I told you this, one of like first things I said fairly new into our friendship. I'm amazed that you guys were so young when you got married. Yeah. You were both in the church. Yeah. In the faith, because I want to. Yeah. Well, this spirituality of this, grew up in it. Both of you literally lived, breathed, died. Well, not died.
I mean, but we would have. Brandon. Yeah. We were true blue. We did it. We did everything we're supposed to.
It's not like me, where my Christianity. I'm not halfway there. I'm there, but I didn't grow up like going to church every single chance the doors were open. No. Yeah. I feel like y'all did. Yeah. Both of you. Yeah. And then to both come to the conclusion together, this isn't working, and staying married through that transition.
Something that not very many people experience.
Blows my mind.
A lot of people that we know, even personally, get divorced. Yeah. One of them doesn't agree and somebody can't get past the issue. Right. And it's really hard. And there's always things that we have to discuss together, and that it's just the way it goes. But we got really lucky that when he said, I found this out, I was able to listen to him without jumping into a place of fear, and vice versa. When he said, I learned this, and I said, oh, I feel this.
And it's like set up to where.
Oh, it's very much set up.
If your husband's coming to you saying this, the first thing you're supposed to be is like, oh no. Yeah.
Well, I know bishops who, when people would come to them and say, my husband's starting to doubt the church, they say, you should probably get divorced.
Oh, really?
Yes. That's fairly common. And when and they don't say that about abuse. If they say, my husband's abusive, they say, have you prayed about it? And so it's a thing in the church. It's a thing. There are many talks given within the last few years. This has kind of been, Brandon and I are not alone during this time. A lot of people our age especially have been leaving the church, the Mormon Church specifically. It is, especially after that children of gay parents policy hit, there was a huge amount of people that said, I'm not okay with that. Right. And so the church is sort of, I feel like the leaders of the church are sort of doing a cleanup. Not really cleanup, I don't know the word, but basically recently, within the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot of addresses given towards the worldwide population of the church. Basically saying your friends and family members who are leaving the church are being misled, or they never had a testimony to begin with. The most recent one that came out called us lazy learners, meaning that we just never really tried to begin with, which, like, first of all, bro, I don't see you at 5 a.m. early morning seminary. I did. Call me lazy, please. I haven't slept since I was 13 years old. I like, there's another one where one of them, I don't remember the exact context of the quote, but he called us taffy pullers in a derogatory way.
What is that even, like, why is that?
Like, essentially, from what I remember, I'd have to pull up the exact quote, but it was essentially being like, silly. They're silly. They're worrying about silly things. They're stressing about silly things. They're just focusing on pulling taffy instead of real life, which, like, not really. And so there's a lot of that going on right now of, telling active members, your family members. The other thing that is often said is that they will immediately fail. Their lives will fail now. That was a big thing when we left, is that our family members really believed that Brandon and I were on the brink of divorce. Our children would become sick. Our home would become foreclosed. We'd hit bankruptcy, and our lives would fall apart. And the fact that none of that has happened, and we're pretty much the same as we always have been, just like a little more nose rings.
Just her.
Just me. Brandon doesn't have a nose ring. I've been trying and trying. Just kidding.
Oh my. I could only, his face.
Oh, I would love it. Oh my gosh. Now I want to buy like fake nose rings and put them on him.
Really?
It'd be hilarious.
Like attractive though?
No, it'd be so awkward.
Okay. Because I'm like, are you into that? Because I'm literally like,
to see him just to see him be awkward with it. He wouldn't know what to do with himself. It'd be funny.
I have seen one guy with it, and I wasn't hating it.
No,
I'm not over here like, let's...
And I think it looks fine.
Wink, wink. Or I wasn't, like, excited for it. But, like...
You know, that is something in the church that it's a fear tactic given towards like, our families, saying, now that your families have left the church, you need to get them back, because otherwise their lives are going to be shit. And sorry.
So we'll cut it out if it gets to where it's too personal. Did you feel like your family tried to get y'all to come back?
Yes.
How?
A lot of times through the girls. We kind of had to like set a hard boundary with everybody and put a stop to it and say, stop taking them in church. Stop sneaking them in church. Because I'm at the point, both of us, the girls hated it. They hated church. They don't want to go back. Portia and Margot remember going to church and being like, this sucks. They hated it.
That's funny.
And so I'm at the point where like, okay, one of the main reasons why we did also decide to leave instead of stay in and try to change it from the outside was because Portia was 7 years old and they were already starting to talk to the little girls about how their clothing choices affected their spirituality and about how they're, they needed to be modest and they needed to be, which that, that's a good thing to a point, but basically the things that I was taught as a youth in growing up in Mormonism that were detrimental to my mental health, especially when things like an assault happened, were things that were already starting to get taught to our young kids. And I was like, I don't want them to be learning this and have to unlearn it like I did. So that was another reason why we decided to inevitably leave the church instead of stay and try to influence it for good from the inside. Because I was like, Brandon and I can spread our, acceptance and tolerance and love all over the place for minorities or for, let's make women a little less ostracized or whatever. But while we're doing that, our kids are learning things that we don't want them to learn. So we're just not gonna. So, So after the initial tension with our family, like after the big bang, so to speak, and they basically, a lot of the tension and hard stuff came from just fear of our family members being afraid for us. What does this mean? What does this change? Just the worst scenario is we never see you again and you become drug addicts and your children live on the streets, and people believe that. Some people think those things. And so, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty. And as time has gone on, I think obviously this isn't what they would choose for me if I called my sisters up and said, hey, would you rather I get rebaptized into the church or keep doing what I'm doing? They're going to say get rebaptized. Although I would say I do think they would all say if that's what you want, if you feel happy doing that. Yeah. I think at this point they all understand, both sides of our family understand that we're not different people. Our kids are good kids. We're good parents. I mean, we're trying to be,
Oh, you are.
That
I don't question your parenting ever. I question some of my friends' parenting over. And you're my friend. But like before I met you, even before I met you, I thought y'all were amazing parents.
Yeah. We have good kids. And so basically I think our families have realized that we're not getting divorced. We're not, drug addicts. Brandon has a successful career. We have a nice home. Our kids are good, kind,
good people,
generous
your
kids.
Yeah.
We're doing our best in society. So, the fears, the initial terrified of know what's going to happen is a little less. It's more like, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You think it's okay to say this, that Brandon's mom had a really hard time. And
she did.
The way that I met Kathleen was through Brandon's mom.
Yeah.
She's my neighbor. She's one of my good friends. And she was having a hard time with it. She's come to terms with it. Yeah. She's talked it out with the bishop and like with other church members.
Yep.
She said that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it was hard for her to see that in the beginning. And now she knows it's okay. And she's very active in the kids' lives and y'all's lives.
Yeah. We see her like 3 times a week, probably.
And so, and everything is okay. And I think that once she saw that it was okay, it helped her to let that go.
Yeah. And that's a fairly common, and we expected that response of this thing that we've all been doing and we've all said is the right thing and the true thing and the thing that we're all part of. Suddenly one of us says, don't want to be a part of it anymore. And that's scary.
It is scary. And it's scary. Like, you're talking about eternity.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, it blew my mind when you're like, yeah, I don't have a, like, spirituality towards, like, Christian style God. And I was like,
I don't. Sorry.
I'm
God,
okay with it now, but not kidding. When I was first meeting Kathleen, I was literally like, but how?
But don't you though? Shouldn't you though? Don't you? Yeah.
But how? It was, I get it. I don't have any questions anymore. I respect it. But my first, like, it was the Christian, like, how do I get her to come to my church? See what my church is like.
Well, because
my church is different.
You've been taught your whole life that the way to have a good life is to live it with a Christian religion. And if you don't have a Christian religion, then all these bad things are going to happen to you.
I gotta save her soul. Well, Jesus gotta save her soul. Gotta find a new church. The Mormons really effed this up, so I'm gonna try and figure out how to get her to my church.
Gotta fix it. And so the idea that a part of any religion, let alone the Mormon religion, because it is the only one I've known. We went to several churches after.
So this is where I give you mad props. You tried.
We did. So, after we left Mormonism, we went to several churches. We went to a few in person. We watched online sermons from several churches, all kinds of stuff. And we just, it never felt good. It never felt right. I always felt awkward. And part of that is because Mormonism is very old school. It's very,
it's
uncomfortable. There's no, clapping or
it's rigid. It's
very, very solemn. There's a lot of joy in it.
I think it's good for okay. Yeah. I think there's style, like my style of church is not everybody's cup of tea.
No.
Like I legit have took a boyfriend to my church and he was like, this isn't a church. You shouldn't have a band on the stage playing music with a light show. This isn't a church. Right. This is a cult. And I was like,
okay, excuse you, sir.
Bye. And that didn't last long. So no, it wasn't because of that. No, but anyways, and he would have probably not felt so weird about being in that church like he did mine. If say we went to
Mormonism is very solemn and quiet. There's a lot of old school hymns. There's a lot of old school. It's not.
And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. And so going to churches like we went to several. We didn't go to Life Church specifically. I think we went to another church similar.
There's a lot
style.
like ours. Yeah. Non-denominational.
Yes. We went to several and we were like, I do not know how to be a person here.
It's a lot, even if you do know how to be a person. And I don't mean that in a bad way. No. There's just a lot. If you've gone to like just a cold, like chill church and then you like not even like old school and then you go there, it's like you gotta like get used to it.
Yeah. It was too much for us.
I couldn't imagine. That had to be odd.
Even the message, there was too much that was reminiscent of how we were raised that we were like, I can't do this. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I can't handle it. And so we just kind of, when we first left, we had the mindset of if we find something, we find something. If we don't, we don't. And we never have. And so I'm not opposed to, if someone walks in the door tomorrow and says, here it is, and it strikes a chord with me, maybe I'll jump on board. We'll see.
That's a really okay. I'm not over here getting excited because you're gonna go to church. I don't expect it. I'm gonna be real. No. But that's beautiful. It's beautiful that you are open-minded. You're not like absolutely not. This is not a thing we want. No, Mormonism didn't work for you guys.
Yeah.
And y'all exited the premises.
Yes, we did.
And the books.
Yep.
And it wasn't easy.
No.
Now, if something was to work, whatever religion that may be, go for it. And you're interested in it or you're open to it. So that's nice. Yeah. So, wow. So, okay. Thank you for telling us all the crazies.
You're welcome.
How do you feel about all that so far?
I feel Well, I mean, like, I've talked about this a
Yeah,
lot.
you're like 6 years out.
Yeah. It's not, it's not something that gets me, like, super emotional anymore.
Did it before?
Yes. When we first left the church, I was very angry. Like, I had a lot of pent-up anger I felt like I'd been lied to my whole life. And I felt betrayed. And I felt...
Were you mad at God? Congratulations. You made it through part 2 of Kathleen's story. Come back for part 3. Did you like what you heard? Rate us and leave us a review.
And follow us on Instagram at The Christian and the Atheist or TikTok at Christian and Atheist for behind the scenes footage and extra content.